And on the occasion of India completing 75 years of independence, on WION Climate Tracker, we decode how far the country has come. Much before climate change made it to political manifestos, India had pushed for sustainable living. Before I tell you more, listen in to what the Prime Minister of India had said about global warming earlier.
आज विश्व पर्यावरण की जो समस्याओं से जूझ रहा है, हमारे पास वो विरासत है। ग्लोबल वार्मिंग की समस्याओं के समाधान का रास्ता हम लोगों के पास है, हमारे पूर्वजों ने दिया हुआ है। जब हम लाइफस्टाइल की बात करते हैं, एनवायरमेंट फ्रेंडली लाइफस्टाइल की बात करते हैं, हम लाइफ मिशन की बात करते हैं, तो दुनिया का ध्यान आकर्षित करते हैं। हमारे पास ये सामर्थ्य है। हमारा बड़ा धान, मोटा धान, मिलेट, हमारे यहां तो घर घर की चीज रही है। ये हमारी विरासत है। हमारे छोटे किसानों के परिश्रम से छोटी छोटी जमीन के टुकड़ों में फलने फूलने वाली हमारे धान, आज दुनिया अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर मिलेट ईयर मनाने के लिए आगे बढ़ रही है। मतलब हमारी विरासत को आज दुनिया, हम उस पर गर्व करना सीखे।
India holds the 10th place in CCPI, which is the Climate Change Performance Index. Over the years, India's performance has been rated high when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. But India is slammed as the world's third highest polluter. The country has not been a historical contributor. Its emissions have added up to a minuscule 4% of the global total. The South Asian nation had made two changes in its climate pledges. One, reduce emissions intensity of its GDP by 45% by 2030, and two, derive about 50% electricity from non-fossil fuel-based energy resources by the same year. According to the Performance Index, the South Asian country is on track to achieve these promises, but New Delhi has made it clear that none of this can be fulfilled without the GCF, which brings me to my next point. The GCF is the Green Climate Fund. It is a source of finance by developed nations. India was one of the first countries to demand the rich nations must pay. You see, carbon emissions have historically risen after the Industrial Revolution, and the rich countries today owe much more than the developing nations. The economics of climate change is crystal clear. The United States and most countries of Europe exploited nature to gain profits. And today, when it's time to heal our planet, these countries want every government to make identical pledges. When in reality, to meet its historical climate responsibility, the US does not need to cut its emissions 100%, it needs to cut them 195%. Which is physically impossible if it confines its efforts to its shores. But this becomes practical if it offers help overseas. India has a long way to go in terms of its climate goals. The climate is changing at a far greater pace than what the country is doing. Experts have pointed out that the government needs to stress on renewable energy policies, like its targets of renewable electricity capacity and a 30% electric vehicle share by 2030. And more could be done to strengthen policies on climate adaptation and resilience building. And for more on this, with me on the broadcast is Bharti Chaturvedi. She is the founder and director of the Chintan Environmental Research and Action Group. Hi, Bharti. Thank you for being here with us. How do you assess India's journey so far on the climate change front?
Well, actually, I think India has done very well. It's shown leadership. It's shown great responsibility. And I think, from 1870 to, 2019, we've only contributed to we've only been responsible for about 4% of the world's greenhouse gases. But in fact, we're flogged for being the third largest. And I think you can see an indicator of our commitment in the recent months when, in fact, earlier this month, the cabinet passed our NDC commitments, which includes a huge leap towards renewable energy on one hand, and on the other hand, countries like Germany, countries like Austria, countries like the Netherlands, all of them moved to coal because they just found it really inconvenient to spend the new kind of money that was required after the Russia-Ukraine conflict and war, because coal became more expensive. So a poor country like us, which has been so badly hit by climate change, so badly hit by, the pandemic, we chose to stick to our commitments and did not kind of go back on them. But these wealthy countries not only haven't been giving us any carbon finance, but in fact even have opened out and gone back to coal, which tells you something about our commitment, but also tells you what a terribly hypocritic world we're dealing with in the carbon space.
Yes, let's talk in greater detail about the Green Climate Fund. Now, India was one of the first countries to demand that the rich countries must pay. How do you view the response by the developed countries when it comes to contributing to the fight against climate change, their promises and their pledges?
Well, I think it's been quite pathetic. It's also been quite tragic because there are a couple of reasons why I think we should talk about their responsibility. Firstly, the rise of countries like England and many other parts of Europe and even the United States. But essentially, there's a historical logic to that, which is that they were able to take resources from their colonies. India was the jewel in the crown, but several other colonies as well. Take those resources and build their industries and, throw all those carbon emissions out. So not only were countries like India completely impoverished, we also enriched those countries. They leapfrogged into development and they were the primary polluters. So there are a number of injustices here historically. The other thing is that when push comes to shove, rich countries don't want to, compromise on their completely extravagant lifestyle. And we're left to fend for ourselves. Now, I think that doesn't make any sense. And when we began the climate discussions all the way back, to Kyoto and all of that, we talked about common but differentiated responsibilities and the whole concept of equity, which was so important. And India played a really big leadership role in, taking all these developing countries and putting the idea of equity on the table, which nobody absolutely wanted to talk about. What's happened now is we've realized that we are on our own right now. And the question of equity isn't as strong as it should be. And I actually believe India should take back that concept and show its international leadership. We have fine standing globally. We should leverage that fine standing and put back equity in a much stronger way on the table. And as we can see, countries like India, or at least India, is at least, we're thinking about these issues. We've got goals. We've got a bunch of things going for us. But not everyone has our capacity. And if we're going to fall down if we don't all collectively, look at this. So I believe that by letting down most of the world's population, by letting down the world's poor, I think the developed countries continue to be very colonial and very unfair in their approach.
Bharti Chaturvedi, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.